of the site, and it included an area that we hadn't been able to evaluate. We got in and started stripping that, started revealing features, and realising quite quickly that we had something that wasn't prehistoric at all. It was much later, and in fact it looked as if it was Saxon settlement. In the middle of the Saxon settlement there appeared what we presumed to be 4 graves, and started excavating the first of those, and straight away we knew something was different about it. It was giving off lots and lots of metal signals, and as we got down into it we realised that most of that was iron, and a very particular form of iron fittings, which we realised were parts of a bed. A Saxon bed burial. They are very rare. This is one of the areas where you find them, but they're not very common. So we realised we had a bed burial, and that was quite extraordinary to start with. We then moved on down into the excavation, confirmed that it certainly was a burial. We found the top of a skull, and it was just coming to the end of a working day, a Friday. So we came to site on the Saturday morning, pouring with rain, erected a large tent shelter over the grave to protect it, and carried on with our meticulous excavation. And I think I said a throwaway comment to the excavator saying, you know, well, if it isn't gold and garnet, I'm not interested.
I think a crowd of people had literally just gathered when I started to excavate around the head, and I cleaned off this small area where I saw something shiny. And people say, oh, you know, gold comes out of the ground completely untarnished, but you never ever believe it. I thought someone had dropped a pound coin in there and they were winding me up.
First of all, we thought it must be a brooch. It looked as if it was round. As the soil came away, we realised, no, it's not round. It's got indents in it. What could it be? And it was only really when it was finally lifted that we realised that what it actually was a solid gold cross inlaid with garnets. Amazingly, exactly what I'd asked for. And there it was, an absolutely beautiful object. So we had, incredibly, not only a bed burial, but a bed burial with an amazingly rare object within it as well. I've been an archaeologist for approaching 25, 26 years. This is only the second piece of gold I've ever seen come out of the ground. It's rare.
So the thing I find most interesting about the burial itself is the fact that you've got one of these pectoral crosses, and they are incredibly rare. This is the 5th one that's ever been found. 3 of the others were probably with female burials, or were stray finds. We just don't know where they came from. The 5th example we know about was the one found in St Cuthbert's coffin, possibly his own personal cross. So these are artefacts that are explicitly Christian in nature. They would have said, you know, I belong to this new religion, and it was a new religion in that part of the later 7th century. So we suspect that most of the bed burials we know about were also of this date, later 7th century. So we're looking at a period when Christianity is coming into areas of Britain. People are converting. Often these were aristocratic people. So I suspect that this girl, whoever she was, would probably have been a member of that class in society. She would have been an aristocrat, possibly very closely linked with one of the new monastic foundations, often headed up by women in this period. I doubt that she was actually the head of a monastery. You know, she's too young, but she may well have been associated in some way. So there are all kinds of things that it would be good to try and find out. We want to look at the Trumpington burials in terms of whether they are related as a family group. It may be possible to use ancient DNA if enough collagen survives to do that. We want to be able to do stable isotope analysis. We can use that to look both at their diet and the sorts of food they're eating, but also to have a look at where they spent their childhood and see whether they moved from somewhere else. So giving you an idea of distances over which people might have moved. And I think at this aristocratic level, people were travelling very long distances. And finally, we want to be able to set the graves in the context of the contemporary settlement that they seem to be a part of. Does that settlement reflect perhaps something about a monastic foundation at Trumpington? There is no documentary evidence for a church at Trumpington before about 1200, but that doesn't mean there wasn't some kind of monastic foundation there at this period that has just been lost in the records.